The murmuring hum of the classroom echoed like a distant lament, lost amongst rustling pages and heated debates on legislation. I sat in the second-to-last row, on one of the worn-out desks, observing my classmates with an analytical yet detached gaze. It was a natural defense I'd honed over the years, a way to protect not only my thoughts, but also my heart. However, on that day, the weight of betrayal settled upon me like a storm about to break. "Chloe, did you hear what Ava said?" Carla's voice cut through the air, sharp as a knife. The room was packed, but the words seemed to echo loud enough. Ava, my younger sister, was up front, chatting animatedly with a group of students. The expression on her face told me everything I dreaded. My mind began to race, a flush of heat rising in my stomach. The classroom became a stage for her machinations, and I, the unwilling spectator of a drama unfolding at my expense. "She's behind the theft of your scholarship, you know." I heard rumors. The rest of Carla's sentence was lost in the turmoil of my thoughts. I couldn't move my lips, couldn't respond. What she was saying wasn't just speculation. It was a cruel revelation. My shoulders slumped inward as I analyzed every movement around me. What Ava didn't know was that her attempt to bring me down was the key to my rise. Suddenly, the scene in the classroom blurred. The faces of my classmates distorted as I daydreamed, reflecting on the sacrifices made for my education. I had spent sleepless nights filling out forms, reviewing laws and case precedents, and all the while, Ava seemed to bask in my success, masking her envy with a false smile. The feeling of betrayal pulsed like a fresh scar in my mind. "My name is Chloe, 34 law student," I told myself, as if I needed to remind myself of the essence that made me strong. But in that room, sitting on a desk that felt more like a torture device, I understood I needed to go beyond the academic. I would use the betrayal as fuel, an adrenaline shot that would propel me towards justice. She thought she could bring me down, but she didn't realize her tip was the key to my ascent. I looked at Ava again. She was laughing, oblivious to the turmoil her actions were causing in my heart. It was as if a cloak of selfishness enveloped her, insulating her from the pain her machinations caused. My gaze narrowed, and in that instant, a cold determination began to form within me. It was time to act. I continued to overhear snippets of conversations in the room. The murmur of voices disintegrated any hopes of reconciliation or goodwill. As the class continued, my spirit became more resolute. Betrayal couldn't just be an act of dissolution, it should transform into an opportunity for growth. But first, I needed a plan. I stood up after the class bell rang, feeling a mixture of despair and determination. Each step resonated in my mind, echoing like the growing beat of a war drum. I headed to the library, a haven of information and knowledge, where I could organize my thoughts and begin to formulate a plan. As the door closed behind me, a contemplative silence filled the room, as if the library itself was waiting to hear me. I took a deep breath. Every page I turned, every book I examined, would be one step closer to the truth. The human mind was the most dangerous battlefield. I could use that field to my advantage. Victory demanded strategy, and I was more than willing to go to the ends of the earth. My heart pounded in anticipation of the fight to come. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the window, illuminating the surface of the table where I sat. Words could be weapons, and I had a heavy arsenal at my disposal. The legal terms, the resolutions, the legislation. Ava had only ignited the flame of my determination, and now I was about to mold it into a spear of justice. With one last look at the books around me, I whispered, "Game on." I was determined to transform betrayal into strength, and every move from that day forward would be meticulously calculated. After all, Ava thought she could bring me down, but I knew I was only just beginning my ascent. Memories of my childhood with Ava are deeply interwoven in my mind, like a tapestry of emotions I can't unravel. I remember the wide smiles and echoing laughter, the afternoons we shared secrets and dreams under the open sky. However, over the years, that innocence became a silent battlefield, where sibling love was overshadowed by competition and rivalry. Looking back, I realized the shadow of envy began to form even in the brightest periods of our youth. Ava was my shadow, always at my heels, but never quite reaching the light I seemed to emanate. Every achievement, every compliment I received, I'd see her retreat, her smile fading into a look of displeasure. Listening to the professor praise my presentation at school, the silence beside me was more deafening than any applause. "Why do you always succeed? It's like you were born to shine," she'd once said, with a mixture of pain and frustration that I never failed to notice. I didn't want my sister to feel this way, but a distance grew between us. Time passed, and when we both decided to pursue law at the same university, the atmosphere became especially tense. I dedicated myself intensely to my studies, while Ava seemed distracted, driven more by the pursuit of social acceptance. "Chloe, let's go to a party. You can't be chained to those books," she constantly urged. But to me, those parties only fueled her perception that appearances mattered more than knowledge. Social interactions were important, but I was determined to make my efforts worthwhile, and inevitably, each day I noticed more and more frustration in her gaze. Scholarships, once a shared dream, became the breaking point. Conversations once full of encouragement turned into veiled disputes, into invisible scratches on our relationship. I remember that night when I looked at her and said, "Ava, I can help you prepare for the exam. Let's do it together." Her response, laced with sarcasm, still echoes in my mind. "I think you're referring to the exam you've already won." The atmosphere froze, and the idea that she might see me only as a rival solidified in my awareness. What could have been a moment of unity now felt like a battlefield. In the classroom, where confident knowledge of the law is essential, Ava's every glance became a painful reminder that a line had been crossed. When hushed whispers revealed her betrayal, the world I lived in crumbled. It wasn't just a scholarship she'd tried to steal. It was the foundation of years of mutual support, now shattered by her boundless ambition. She thinks she can bring me down, I thought, seething with anger and confusion. But what she didn't know was that this betrayal wouldn't be my end, but the spark that would ignite the urgency and need for transformation. I remember each step I took to the library that fateful afternoon. The door closed behind me, and a contemplative silence ironically welcomed my pain. Every book, every manuscript I found would become not just a source of information, but a weapon in the fight for my reputation and honor. Among the stacks of knowledge, the echoes of mixed feelings of anger, betrayal, and determination transformed into something deeper, a burning will to resilience. It was time to create and chart a strategic path, because there was one truth I understood clearly. Information is a tool, capable of severing the thread of betrayal. Hearing the final chimes of the library bell and visualizing the blank pages before me, a renewed sense of purpose emerged. Knowledge wouldn't just give me the chance to expose Ava, but also to redeem myself and elevate my career to new heights. Every research paper, every legal citation would make me stronger. In building my defense against her betrayal, I would also be shaping my future. Ava's reaction became increasingly clear as I delved deeper into the books. I needed to create a meticulous plan to not only reclaim what was mine, but to revitalize the integrity I might have let slip through her fingers. The answers would reside in my mind, pulsing like an engine accelerating with each new piece of information I absorbed. The combination of legal strategies and sharp analysis gave me confidence. I was no longer preparing for a fight, but for an ascent. The plan formed in my mind, each new idea solidifying as a link in a powerful chain that would propel me forward. With this, I realized that knowledge wasn't just a defense. It was a form of transformation. With each word processed, I became stronger and more resolute, that injustice could not triumph over truth. The distance between us would become greater because of Ava's betrayal. I would choose to be the sister who prevails, who learned from pain, and who transforms an obstacle into an immensely greater opportunity. As morning light turned to shadow, I knew the battle was only just beginning. Ava certainly underestimated my ability to recover, But she was about to discover what it means to underestimate someone like me. Ultimately, the betrayal wouldn't just be the end of our relationship and the trust between us, but the beginning of a new chapter where I would reach farther than either of us ever imagined. The game had changed, and the match that followed wouldn't just be about winning, but about building an even more vibrant and brilliant future. I laugh now to think that her betrayal became a catalyst for my transformation, and I was more than ready to embrace this new reality. The days following Ava's betrayal were marked by a mix of burning anger and icy resolve. I felt like a pressure cooker, bubbling with a determination that could not and would not be ignored. The plan was forming in my mind, but the first phase required a meticulous investigation into the foundations of her sabotage. I needed to understand what had really happened and gather the necessary elements to expose her. The human mind is an intricately designed labyrinth, where weaknesses often become its greatest vulnerabilities, and I was prepared to exploit them. The first step began with analyzing the available information. Within the library, I made a conscious effort to observe my classmates, paying attention to any conversation, any movement that might lead me to the truth. Secret comments at study tables, whispers in the hallways, even furtive glances became pieces of a puzzle where I needed to fit the information. The effort demanded concentration, but the adrenaline coursing through my body kept me alert. That day, I had finished reading a lengthy article on the complexities of scholarships and their guidelines. With this in mind, I decided that the first action would be to consult my academic mentor, Dr. Evans. He had always supported me, and despite the pressure exerted by the university, I felt he could be a valuable ally in this fight. "Chloe, how can I help you?" he asked, noticing something different in my voice. His cautious tone didn't go unnoticed. I needed to be careful with every word, since my plan depended on his perception of my resilience, and not on the emotional instability caused by Ava's betrayal. "Dr. Evans, it's about my scholarship. I've received information that some decisions have been, let's say, suspicious. I'm afraid something isn't right. Could you help me investigate?" I asked, trying to hide the urgency in my request. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes reflecting a deep understanding. "Chloe, you've always stood out as a student concerned with ethics, but be warned, the line between curiosity and indiscretion can be thin, and the winds can change quickly." His words resonated in my mind, but it was the answer I wanted. He would commit to helping. In the following days, I began compiling information about my scholarship, examining documents, reviewing emails, and financial reports surrounding the fund that administered it. With each new discovery, my conviction solidified. Ava's betrayal wasn't just a blow to my aspirations. It was a scandal that could reverberate throughout the university. I found unexpected allies, other students who felt unfairly treated by the unjust processes that led to scholarship decisions. I shared information about the possibility of Ava's influence, and thus the network of allies began to form. At the end of an exhausting week, however, a friend named Tyler surprised me with information that stunned my understanding of the situation. "Chloe, listen to this," he said, his expression serious. "There's something you need to know. I've heard rumors about an exchange of information that took place between Ava and the rector's office. What she's doing is more complicated than it seems." "Information exchange? What do you mean?" I asked, holding the paper he had given me with a trembling hand. On the table, I saw a transcript of a conversation in which Ava was aligning her maneuvers with another student who was known to be a friend of Dr. Helen. The latter, the rector, had always admired my work, but now the story was taking an unexpected turn. My heart pounded. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. I needed to be careful. On a quiet night, I sat down with my notes, the papers scattered across my desk like pages of a story that wasn't yet ready to be written. "How could you do this, Ava?" I murmured to myself as I tried to map out the situation. My thoughts were flooded with romanticized memories of our childhood, of the complicity that had been lost to dragons created by unbridled ambition. What Ava didn't know was that her prediction was wrong. She underestimated me, and I had the skills to fight ethically and strategically. My notes were now full of action points. I prepared a table containing all the events that had occurred since the beginning of college, from my internship approvals to the rector's growing confidence in my performance. What Dr. Helen might not have known was that Ava's influence, with its web of lies, could obscure her vision. One afternoon, the echoes of voices led me to another revelation. By intertwining information on social media involving Ava and her friends, it was as if the final puzzle pieces fell into place. I concluded that even though Ava was surrounding herself with allies, her weaknesses were visible. Her biases and insecurities were on display for anyone to see, as if she were extending an invitation to my ascent. Once I revealed them, the battle of knowledge I would engage in was not just about my recovery, but about ensuring that the truth was heard. I decided to confront the situation head-on. The plan that had allied itself with my spirit was forming into a narrative, and that narrative was about to be written. The day of revelation was approaching, and there was a spark of hope in my heart. What did not destroy me could make me stronger. Ava's injustice would not be the epilogue of my story, but rather the introduction of a new chapter that I was about to narrate. The pursuit of truth had brought me to the brink of my own transformation. Each step forward now led to a higher purpose, not just to reclaim what was mine, but to surpass all expectations. Victory was closer than I could imagine. And with one last look at my notes, I made a promise to myself. I would not yield to betrayal, nor would I let unchecked ambition overshadow what I could achieve. The game had changed, and revelations were only an investigation away. The weeks following our conversation with Dr. Helen proved crucial. Each day was a new challenge, and an opportunity to gather more evidence of the corruption pervading the scholarship distribution. The fight for truth was now a constant in my life, a new purpose illuminating my path, previously obscured by Ava's betrayal. My first step was to delve deeper into past scholarship decisions. Describing my research method, it was as if the letters danced on the screen, spreading in an organized fashion into notes and tables. I used everything around me, and that included dissatisfied students who also began to join my movement. Juliana's comment about other dissatisfactions still echoed in my mind, and I couldn't ignore the need to add more voices to my cause. Casual conversations at the cafeteria tables revealed students from various disciplines who were aware of the same injustices. Through informal dialogues, I began to sketch out a potential support group. Evening conversations became more than just complaints. "We need to formalize this," said a student named Paul, who shared the frustration over his attempts to secure support for research projects and scholarships. His words sparked an idea in me. Unity is strength. Their collective pressure could be what we needed to unmask Ava and the network she had built. In parallel, I posted flyers on campus bulletin boards, announcing a meeting where anyone who felt unfairly treated could share their stories. The room chosen for the meeting had good visibility, but also provided a welcoming atmosphere, conducive to people feeling comfortable to speak. Many voices emerged, and I saw that I wasn't alone. There was a collective of equally frustrated students, some hiding behind smiles that didn't reflect their true emotions, others already open about their indignation. A sense of injustice permeated the air. The meeting began with nervous murmurs, but once the conversation was established, the stories shared a common thread: the struggle for recognition, fairness, and above all, the disillusionment with a system that didn't seem to work in our favor. A social science student quoted a popular saying, "One finger cannot lift a weight," and at that moment, I realized the movement was growing. A wave of hope flowed through our interactions. Now, we had a common purpose and the desire to fight for our rights. With everyone's stories, realizing I now had a stronger force that could be leveraged, I decided to seize the opportunity to gather all the evidence into the portfolio I had begun to build. With each new piece of evidence, whether through testimonies, online interactions, or even issues discussed in WhatsApp groups, I organized the original conversations and the points where Ava and her network had violated the rules and ethics of the institution. Nothing could stop me from going further. One ally who stood out was Leo, a journalism student who decided to interview the participants about the challenges they faced and the topics that could appear on academic social media. Together, we created an Instagram platform dedicated to documenting all the reports of injustice we gathered, giving a voice to each one and exposing the manipulation that had occurred. The idea was impressive, a visual and interactive approach, combining stories, images, and short videos, contributing to a narrative that would transcend the walls of the university. What initially seemed like a small movement began to break down the barriers of confidentiality and fear that existed. The echo of our voices grew stronger. Each new story shared on our Instagram was an inflatable citizen within the university, a bubble of questions that reached not only students, but senior staff and even the established media. Based on data obtained earlier, the narrative also began to incorporate historical context and the nepotistic practices that existed within the institution. I was convinced that social media could draw the attention of the administration and potentially Dr. Helen herself. It was something she couldn't ignore for long. As soon as the first post went up, the response was instantaneous. Students began sharing the content, and messages of support flooded our comment sections. What started as a small flame quickly became an uncontrollable fire. The clamor for truth spread, attracting the attention of the university administration and press offices, and I knew a decisive moment had arrived. That day, I was awakened by messages confirming a meeting called by the administration regarding the issues raised. The day of the meeting was approaching, and the anxiety was palpable. At the same time, I felt uncontrollable waves of expectation. The pressure of being the voice of change became a heavy mantle, but I couldn't back down. Entering the meeting room, now a significant room filled with executives and administrators, I felt a mixture of empowerment and fear. Dr. Helen was present, and her eyes reflected firmness. "So, Chloe, what do we have to say?" she asked, her pen tapping on the table as her presence asserted itself. I took a deep breath, surrounded by supportive fellow students, and began to present the issues. Using the test results, testimonies, and supporting documents I'd brought, my certainty couldn't have been greater. "We are here to discuss a practice within our university that we believe to be corrupt and unjust," I said, looking around, making sure to maintain eye contact with Dr. Helen. "Our goal is to establish new policies to ensure that the allocation of scholarships and opportunities is not influenced by personal relationships or friendships." As I heard the other students' voices echo and unite in support, a wave of inclusivity washed over the room. Each student spoke eloquently, and I could see Dr. Helen assessing everything with a contemplative and resolute expression. The evidence was compiled, organized, and the story we were telling was coalescing into something powerful. Once more, hope bloomed, and I saw in her eyes the possibility of change. University administrators began to speak up, and I knew we were finally facing a movement that would break the silence that so often concealed the truth. "This is a serious matter that requires our immediate attention," Dr. Helen conceded in response. "I appreciate you bringing this to light and having the courage to organize. I felt I was achieving more than I had hoped for. I was gaining respect, recognition, and the promise that the university would commit to this fight. The feeling of victory throbbed in my heart. Despite the battle of distrust and doubt, the determination of a collective was about to make a difference. And so, with the foundation of each word and each story, the movement gained strength. What were once shadows of betrayal were now becoming the light of a new beginning, and we were the agents of this change. The journey for truth wouldn't end in that meeting room. It was only just beginning. I knew the battle was far from over. Consequences would certainly come, and Ava wouldn't be without a response. What I couldn't predict, however, was how poetic the victory for the fight could be. Freedom and justice took on new meanings, and here we were, ready to face them with courage and determination. The game had changed to the world I desired, for myself, and for all the students who had joined my cause. The path to transformation was long, but now I was ready to traverse it alongside my allies. The atmosphere on campus after the hearing was electrically charged with energy and anticipation. The impact of what we had revealed reverberated throughout, and the echoes of our actions began to establish a new normal. The hallways, once silent, now pulsed with debates and conversations about equality and dignity. Students who had previously felt powerless began to speak out. It seemed the entire university was finally waking up to the reality of the corruption that permeated its walls. Ava was no longer an untouchable shadow. The pressure on her began to mount, and I realized the fight wasn't just for what was mine, but for an ethic that had been compromised. In phone calls and social media trends, the wave of support in our favor was expanding, and a new front of allies was forming. Each new comment or endorsement that emerged in the media, like a sign of recognition, made the movement's strength more palpable. My heart pounded with intense emotion as I watched colleagues who were once just acquaintances join us, solidifying the fight for truth. Students became friends in adversity, and the pride in fighting for something bigger than ourselves overcame any rivalry that old family ties might have carried. Every shared laugh, every lively conversation about our strategies, gave me hope that change was approaching. Over time, we engaged more students, organizing weekly meetings to collect accounts of injustice and provide a safe space for everyone to express themselves. It was clear that betrayal had become fuel to unite us all. "Together we are stronger," I used to repeat at each meeting. And this statement had become an anthem for our cause. With that in mind, we decided it was time to formalize a petition. The idea was to gather signatures and present it to the administration, demonstrating that the students' voices could not be ignored. Our campus meetings began to transform into true community events. The signature collection point became a place where solidarity blossomed. Students from different courses, including their family and interested parties, showed up to offer their support. "I thought I was alone in this," I heard a freshman say as they joined the movement. The feeling of unity had definitively ceased to be an abstract idea and become a tangible reality. On a sunny afternoon, while collecting signatures, I encountered Ava again. She approached me with a strained smile, sweat beading on her forehead. "Chloe, this isn't worth it. Don't you see you're feeding off something negative?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. "It's the truth we're seeking, Ava. This isn't about you or me, but about what's right," I replied, completely resolute. Her gaze went vacant for a moment, but then she recomposed herself, trying to remain above the situation. "You'll only hurt yourself this way." I was overcome with a wave of compassion, a glimpse of the sister I once knew, but I couldn't forget the betrayal I had wept over. Her image was transitioning from a familiar figure to a rival in a cruel game. The reopening of the university brought a new energy, a clear resilience that filled not only the students, but also the administration that had once seemed hardened by concessions. The auditorium pulsed with lively voices, and the speeches bubbled with emotion. I felt we were demanding a new era. It was a landmark moment. The collective strength of us all was creating a scenario where everyone could be heard, regardless of their background, power, or influence. The first conference after the audit took place the following week. What should have been a routine event became a milestone of change. Students were eager to hear the administration's plans on how they would work to rectify the irregularities and simplify the scholarship allocation. Dr. Helen addressed the audience with a resolute and determined demeanor. The respect she had gained throughout the crisis was now radiant, and I knew her words could rewrite the university's history. "Dear students, we are here today to acknowledge that the practices we allowed as an administration have failed. This has shattered the trust you placed in us. We are ready to change that. We want to hear your concerns and ensure everyone has an active voice in building a fair and transparent environment," she said, directing her unwavering gaze at the packed audience. Applause echoed for minutes, and this battle for righteousness began to glimmer on the horizon. But as hope took the reins, I knew Ava's resistance hadn't been overcome. Even amidst the storm of support now flooding the university, the echo of her betrayal resonated, and she wouldn't surrender easily. The administration announced the formation of committees that would include students, faculty, and staff to review and reform the scholarship systems transparently. It was a significant step in the right direction. However, with success came whispers of retaliation. Ava, isolated but still determined, began spreading rumors that it was all an emotional roller coaster, an attempt to destabilize the established order. Students who were beginning to believe in the change started to wonder, would this fight truly be viable? I realized the challenge we faced in transforming the wave of support into a sustainable fight. So, with the newly formed advocacy group, we decided to establish a direct line of communication between students, faculty, and the administration. We created a social media group that would allow any student, regardless of their position, to raise issues, suggestions, and reports of injustice. The goal was to create an environment where transparency could flourish instead of being stifled. Under the shadow of transformation, I frequently met with colleagues who had witnessed the system's weakness. I journeyed with them to meetings, seizing every chance to reaffirm that this fight wasn't just about us, but about future generations. Students who were once ignored were now writing the rules. Community initiatives bore fruit, and new voices arose. The movement grew, infecting even the most hesitant classes. However, Ava didn't give up. She started to gain allies among those closest to her, those who weren't our supporters, those who could be swayed by social pressure. She organized an underground group, focusing on garnering support for her viewpoint. If it was once just a matter of competitiveness, now she was trying to turn students against what they perceived as an injustice. "The change is just a facade. You'll all regret this wave of revolt," echoed words that were beginning to weave themselves into the conversations of some students. The sun began to set as a new meeting called by Ava took shape. Information about the event traveled like wildfire. What began as an event to discuss the changes quickly transformed into a battleground. Ava's supporters were ready for a verbal battle, and I realized our unity was facing a new instance of opposition. This war was far from over. As we prepared a defense, one of our allies shared that Ava planned to directly attack the rhetoric we had created. "She'll present herself as a martyr, claiming the administration is showing favoritism by changing the rules on her account, and that you are the real enemies," he told us. The situation was critical. Not only was the group's integrity at stake, but also our reputation for the next semester. We needed a plan, one that included preparing robust arguments, and at the same time, maintaining unity. We held an emergency meeting where each member brought their concerns, and we planned our approaches to the hearing. The group vibrated with affirmations. "We need to show that truth isn't manipulated. We won't be naive in this fight. We're here for a reason." That fervent unity was the strength I perceived as necessary to feel prepared. On the day designated for the meeting called by Ava, the pressure was palpable. The auditorium was packed, not only with students but also with members of the administration who were ready to hear both sides of the story. With an argument plan in hand, I took care to ensure that the truth wouldn't get lost in the noise of Ava's emotional rhetoric. When it came time to present our position, my heart pounded. The glow of motivation ran through my mind. This was the moment we could truly enforce the changes we desired. Ava took the stage first, surrounded by her closest allies, but her shine was dimmed. She began her speech with a mixture of accusations and emotional appeals that were quickly challenged. But what the team couldn't foresee was her manipulative skill. Many fell for her rhetoric, which made it clear that the challenges we faced were far from over. With the audience divided, I began my presentation by defending the truth. I showed people's faces, the connection of evidence not only breaking the lies, but reaffirming our fight against dishonesty. The integrity we were seeking wasn't just a personal victory, it was a new era. Voices rose, and amidst uncertainty, reluctance, and even fiery defenses of the status quo, we kept our focus on our greater goal. When the dust finally settled after both sides presented their evidence, the administration quickly gathered to deliberate. As voices echoed in the room during the vote, an eloquent silence formed, each one waiting for the second opportunity to capture the victory of truth. I knew we were ready for any outcome, but confidence filled with hope filled the room. Following the meeting, Dr. Helen took the stage, her expression serious. "The decision will be formalized shortly, but the scope of this discussion. What has been presented has brought urgent issues to light that we need to address. We will prepare an action plan. The audience, previously divided, now began to move towards a consensus. A wave of change was palpable. What was once an emotional battle was starting to shift into practical consequences. The following days brought a series of breakthroughs and unexpected turns. News of the fight for justice at the university began to gain traction. Alumni rallied, and soon Ava's case became a symbol of the fight against oppression in academia. Social media columns debated our protests, amplifying our message that the institutions we hoped to serve were finally being held accountable. Against this backdrop, Ava disappeared. During a meeting where we demonstrated continued support and reaffirmed the transformation, she wasn't there. Her silence became an echo we simply accepted as a space she couldn't control. And as the truth began to prevail, I knew her retaliation had passed, and that our journey was only just beginning. Finally, after weeks of anticipation, the administration announced significant changes to regulatory procedures. There would be a review of the scholarship allocation system, a new academic transparency committee, and clear protocols to ensure that any future favoritism would be promptly announced. What followed was a room full of applause and expressions of hope. I knew the journey for truth wasn't just about confronting Ava, but about facing more than just personal conflicts. It was about ensuring that dignity once again became fundamental to the system. As we organized to implement these new guidelines, the warmth of victory resonated anew. Each step toward justice reinforced the idea that we could change things. And so, the fight for transparency continued. And I knew that together, we were ready for any challenge that came our way, remembering that never giving up was the true meaning of resistance. The game had changed, and we were going to continue fighting and growing, not just for ourselves, but for all future generations. The reopening of the university brought a new breath of life, and the transformation began to be felt in every corner. The auditorium overflowed with support, as old and new students united in a chorus of voices, clamoring for truth and justice. The victory in our fight felt increasingly tangible, manifesting in new guidelines and the formation of committees that would guarantee transparency in scholarship allocations. In this way, dignity had become a priority to be restored. The pressure on Ava, who until then seemed distant, grew with the increase in solidarity among the students. Even with the movement gaining momentum, it was impossible to ignore that some voices still questioned the results of this new era. Amid whispers of retaliation and despair, the resilience of the students became a symbol of hope. In this scene of transformation, Ava seemed a distant echo, and the silence about her was accepted as a consequence of her actions. With the strengthening of the new structure, students began to mobilize around narratives that had previously been silenced. Informal conversations became regular meetings, where we shared ideas and stories about the injustices we experienced. We were determined to ensure that the fight for justice and transparency would not be temporary, but a continuous pursuit of change. I was chosen to join the new Allocation and Transparency Committee. It was a step forward, both in my personal journey and in the pursuit of a fairer academic environment. We convened meetings to discuss the guidelines and hear the concerns of the students. With each testimony, with each account, the power of collectivity became more evident. The need for a space where every voice could be heard and respected was clear. Amid this new reality, a more subtle challenge began to emerge. Other students close to Ava began to promote discourses that attempted to discredit the changes. "What we're seeing is just a facade. The old regime is still present," they said. I was seized by the responsibility of ensuring that our struggle was not undone. It was necessary to create a space for dialogue, where the truth and concerns of everyone were addressed. I organized an open event to discuss the changes and welcome the questions of the academic community. The auditorium, once again, filled with voices eager for a safe space. After a presentation on the guidelines and new procedures, the questions began to flow, bringing legitimate concerns to the surface. "We must ensure that the changes are sustainable," said one student. Another classmate raised her hand. "What if Dr. Helen isn't willing to truly listen to our requests?" I knew that even in this space of welcome and dialogue, Ava could still cast a shadow over the community. The unease was palpable, and I couldn't let thorns from the past ruin the progress that had already been established. Following the discussions, I asked everyone to share their own views on the values they wanted the university to uphold. Andrea, a close colleague, suggested that we form working groups focused on topics such as equality, inclusion, and ethics. In this way, we could create a solid platform to ensure that students could follow the change, becoming not only part of it, but active defenders of this new ethos. As I prepared for the upcoming meetings, I received a message from Ava. She wanted to discuss the situation. A feeling of anxiety mixed with surprise. What could she want now? I wondered. In the end, I decided that, however difficult it might be, it was necessary to open space for dialogue, to heal the wounds that were still exposed, and to ensure that history did not repeat itself. At the college coffee shop, I ran into Ava. She was tense, but willing to talk. Chloe, I finally realized I'm no longer sure I want to continue this fight. What I did was wrong, and the truth has its own way of coming out, she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. Hearing her, I saw a new side to her, vulnerability. It was as if, after all the battles, Ava was finally reckoning with the consequences of her choices. Ava, we need to understand that the fight for justice isn't against you, but for a space where everyone can grow and be heard, I replied, looking directly into her eyes. We were building something new, and that didn't just include defeating her, but allowing for transformation. In the following days, we moved our story forward, focusing on cultivating a culture of support and inclusion at the college. With the help of working groups, we refined our established procedures and protocols, establishing that justice didn't need to be an abstract concept, but a daily practice. What was taking shape was a legacy that would extend beyond our college years. The idea that future generations would have a safe and equitable space became our mission. The strength that emerged from the fight against Ava's oppression had become a symbol of transformation, a beacon of hope for future students. Amid this new reality, Ava took on a new role in the community, seeking to collaborate on change, and, reflecting on everything that happened, I realized that the true victory wouldn't just be over the conflict itself, but in the ability to learn from past mistakes. There was more to be done, and there was still much to achieve. The fight for truth and justice had only just begun, and I knew that, together, far stronger and deeper foundations would be forged. Through my commitment and willingness to collaborate, I felt a new purpose, a new future being shaped. Not just for the college, but for all of us who united in the pursuit of truth.